Let's get it going with the Brooklyn Nets, where the Nets hire Steve Nash to be their new head coach. Nash is a Hall of Fame player, but he has no previous coaching experience. The hire has some calling it, quote, white privilege, which is basically getting advantages over other races because of the color of your skin. But later in the odd twist, it was also referred to as, quote, black privilege, since Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving used their privilege to get the coach they wanted. Acho, a lot to unpack here, but is Steve Nash hire an example of white privilege?
No, it's not. And there's so many ways and avenues I could go. Okay. But let me just speak from the heart and start with this. When we're using volatile terms like white privilege or terms we may not hear as often like black privilege, we have to establish one thing and one thing first. The decision made, it has to have been made based on the adjective that precedes the word privilege. That's the only way that it can be white privilege, black privilege. The decision made must have been made based on the adjective that precedes the word privilege. So what are you talking about, Acho? This isn't a freaking English class. That adjective, white. Was Steve Nash hired because he is white? And the answer is no. The last 8 head coaches that were hired, former players without coaching experience. 4 of those 8 have been black. The last 5, 3 of those 5 have been black. But then, Marcellus, I heard something that was even more ludicrous. Well, he was hired by 2 black superstar players in Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. So is that not black privilege? Remember, what is the word that precedes privilege? Black. Was Steve Nash hired because they were black? No, he wasn't hired because KD and Kyrie are black. He was hired because they were superstars. And their privilege in that instance would be superstars. Whether they was white superstars is irrelevant. They're superstars, and so they have that sort of power. We have to be careful, Marcellus, when talking about terms, serious matters like these, of throwing out words like, oh, he was hired because of white privilege. Because then it's like the boy who cried wolf. You can't always just play that card when the card has no means to be on the table.
I love it. I agree with you. He was not hired because of white privilege. We'll get into, I guess, a more pure understanding, observation, and definition of white privilege later in this block. Right now, let's just talk about Steve Nash, now the coach of the Brooklyn Nets. And it's unfortunate that he has to now live under this cloud, this shadow of white privilege, despite being a 2-time MVP, Hall of Fame point guard with tremendous relationships, if you ever spoke to him like I have, an amazing acumen, an amazing humility, and an amazing ability to communicate, to express what he knows in his head about the game of basketball to those he works with. They call him Kevin Durant's Yoda, like in the sense of working with Kevin Durant, having that relationship right here. And you talked about some of the statistics, because I don't like to get too far afield with my opinion unless I can support it with the facts and the reality. Since 1978, 9 of the 16 coaches who have become NBA coaches without previous head coaching experience, 9, more than half, were black. Like Derek Fisher of the Knicks. We are in a position where it's Ty Lue going to the Lakers, and he's like, nah, I don't want that job. But now Ty Lue probably to the Sixers, right? And we're going to sit here and now try to really trivialize this hire because of what Stephen A. said and what others are saying about this is white privilege. I find no merit of this being white privilege, but I would like to discuss probably a little deeper about what white privilege is.
Well, let's dive in because, again, this is such a serious topic, both in sports and out of sports. And Marcellus, we can't take this lightly. Again, if you're going to talk about white privilege, I've previously said it's not saying that your life hasn't been hard. It's saying your skin color hasn't contributed to the difficulty of your life. But Steve Nash and this hire has nothing to do with skin color. We don't even have to look at any other NBA team. Marcellus, we don't have to look at any other previous generations. Look at the Nets. Remember, they hired Jason Kidd after winning nearly 50 games. They hired him to replace in full-time Avery Johnson, another black head coach. That team had Garnett. It had Darren Williams. If I'm not mistaken, it had Paul Pierce. It was a team that was supposed to win big-time games, hired a coach, black coach, no previous coaching experience. Steve Nash, you could make a very strong, convincing argument that he accomplished more as a player than Jason Kidd did, although Jason Kidd did win an NBA championship. Yep. But outside that championship, you could make the argument Steve Nash accomplished more. So if we're going to make ludicrous to a degree statements like this, if we're going to make kind of outrageous statements, it just has to be backed by empirical data. But the problem is the empirical data doesn't show that it's white privilege. Our opinions can't really state with reason that it's white privilege. And so ultimately you can end up undermining a cause, Marcellus, when you do play, if we being real, when you do play the race card, if that card don't even need to belong in this game.
I don't think that the card needs to be applied in this game or any games at all. I don't believe in white privilege. And I know that people will say, what are you talking about? Let me explain. The conversation of white privilege is a distraction that leaves racism and true power intact while you now attack it from social and other psychological measures, trying to pull on the emotions of white people and try to guilt them into really trying to say that all of the things that they have inherited, all the things that they have worked for or accumulated, had some percentage of it to be based on their skin color.
That's a fact, though. I don't know if that's an opinion.
No. That's what it's supposed to say.
Okay.
But in reality, we got to look at the devil's in the details.
Talk to me.
There's so many white people walking around here right now that had no connection to slavery, had no connection to our ill past, and are not benefiting from their skin color. Because if on its merits, white privilege would make you assume that everyone white is privileged. Are they?